Thank you, economists, for putting on this subject matter, gene editing, really exciting technology that we're seeing develop through our food systems. Here in the United Kingdom, you might hear it referred to as precision breeding. If you're from the EU or in Europe, you may hear it referred to as new genomic techniques. Elsewhere in the rest of the world, you may hear it referred to as gene editing, CRISPR. There are many other acronyms, but many acronyms, one concept: gene editing, the process of making targeted, precise changes within an organism's genome. It is like conventional plant breeding, only faster. It is not like GM, and that's an important distinction to make. I'm joined today by a fantastic panel, and what I like about this is we've got a panel that can look at the whole side of gene editing, right the way from developers, right the way through to farmers and regulators as well. So we should have a really full, interesting discussion about all of the issues through this emerging technology. So if I invite up to the stage Michael Keller, who's the Secretary General for the International Seed Federation, Tom Adams, who's Chief Executive of Pairwise, Tom Alan Stevens, founder and creator of the British On-Farm Innovation Network, the fantastically acronymed BOFIN, and Rebecca Sudworth, Director of Policy at the Food Standards Agency of England and Wales. Just a bit of introduction about me. Agricultural Industries Confederation, we represent agri-businesses in the supply chain. We're a trade body, and I also chair a working group in government on precision breeding and trade. So what I might just do, just to set this out, Tom, tell me, perhaps if you could just tell me why you started Pairwise, because I think that's quite an interesting introduction to gene editing as a concept and why you created the business.
Sure, Ed. I think that's a question I asked myself many times. In 2012, several different scientists came upon this technology coming out of bacteria that allowed very precision changes within a genome around this thing called CRISPR. And that was something that in higher plants, and you've seen this being applied to animals as well, to humans, was not possible before. And it was, I think I saw it as an opportunity to really take an approach into crop genetics where we could do a lot more than just apply technology to corn. Not that there's anything wrong with corn. I heard about the 240 bushels per acre there. That's great. But the world has a lot of investment that goes into just a couple of crops. And this is a technology that on the surface is very approachable by very many different parties, and I think it's been playing out that way. And it allows you to approach improvements in crops that people eat, which I think not only is useful in terms of helping to solve some of the challenges that we've been hearing about in the food systems all day, but also helps to take a lot of the edge off of the question of why technology is useful when it actually provides direct value for people. So that's, in a nutshell, why we started Pairwise.
Great, thank you. Michael, perhaps if we turn to you, what's really interesting is that gene editing is now sort of something that's being discussed on a global level. And I'll just be interested from your perspective within ISF of where are we in global terms on this issue?
Yeah, thanks so much. You didn't ask me if I found the association, because we are 100 years old now as an association. Now, first of all, I think, and remember back this morning, Moderator explained us all the challenges we are facing. And he mentioned in the last slide, one of the things which can transform challenges in possibilities to address them is gene editing. That means gene editing, and this is important, is today recognized as a tool. And I would like to insist on one thing. It's not only about gene editing. We should not forget it's about breeding in general. Therefore, we call it plant breeding innovation. And we are adding another tool in the toolbox of breeders to address the diversity of challenges. Now, if you ask me, what's the global environment on gene editing and the regulatory oversight? I think the first point, and you will see it, it's very small, but I hope you can see it, is green. there's a lot of green. And green means the regulatory oversight allows the use of gene-edited material. I think this is a starting point, and this is therefore yet a different mindset. And I would be optimistic and positive because we know the challenges and we need to be able to use the diversity of the breeding tools. The most important thing for a breeder, because it's about investment, and you asked Tom why he set up a company. Yeah, it's an investment, but it's also one day to make a benefit out of the investment. It's to incentivize also in investments. The most important thing is, because we get often a question, yeah, now give us examples of gene-edited material. There are not so many out there because it takes time. Why it takes time? Because the whole breeding process can take for potato 14 years, for lettuce 20 years, for wheat 8 years. And a breeder thinks 10 times before starting to use such a material, what do I need? Predictability of rules, science-based rules, the clarity of rules, and I will end on this one, consistency. And the most important thing, we speak about systems approach. We are in a global system. Seed dependency of every country is a reality. That means seeds are moving around the world. Therefore, we need consistency also, not only what the discussion is in Europe, but around the globe. And this is the starting point also for many breeders in Europe. Perhaps if the things are going right, they will start to use it in their breeding programs. Just to set it, we are going in a direction, and you mentioned, I will stop here, you mentioned different terminologies. Perhaps the most important thing which is in common of all the regulations around the globe, and there are many countries who have regulations now in place, it's no foreign DNA. I would say it like this, and it's indistinguishable from the varieties coming from previously used breeding tools. I think this is the trigger which is coming everywhere. The nitty-gritty, there are differences, but here we are.
Thank you. Tom, Alan Stevens, I think part of the interest with this subject is obviously there's the theory, there's the innovation, but often we sort of miss out talking about actually applying it on farm and the practitioners, the farmers, who are going to be the ones in the future, we hope, taking up the technology, making informed choices. I'd just be interested from your perspective, what does your network do in terms of working with farmers, and how do we sort of empower the farmer to be part of this process so that it's truly a joint supply chain endeavour?
Yeah, no, thanks, Ed, and thank you very much to the Economist Impact for inviting us. The main thing with this technology in particular is involve us as farmers. So we do on-farm research. We support farmers who do on-farm research, and there are many farmers who do really good research on farm. The difficulty is they're not supported to do that. So the knowledge that they acquire through doing that, it's never supported, so it's never shared, and so on. And that's a huge untapped potential. That's what we do. We bring that research together. And so when it comes to gene editing, there are two aspects in particular where farmers need to be involved. First of all, in the discussion around gene editing. Do you know that there's actually been, in all the research, no one has actually researched how farmers feel about gene-edited crops, which I think is staggering. In the grey literature, there have been 2 surveys, and we've done both of them. So we know how farmers feel about it. We're going to be doing some more research as well on this. And that's really important because we need to understand how all farmers feel about it, both farmers who are in favour of it and both farmers who are against it, so that it can be introduced correctly. The second aspect is the research itself. Now, we are in a unique position here in England that we can now bring, because of the change in legislation, we can bring these crops from the glasshouse out into the field. This is the only place in Europe where we can do that. So with the UK or England, you can't do it in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. We can now become a test bed for this technology, bring these traits from the glasshouse into the field, and we can see how they perform. And that's what we're doing. So we've got 3 cereals and an oilseed rape that thanks to DEFRA funding, we've set up a platform. We're multiplying them up at the moment, and we're going to be bringing them out next year, well, from this autumn, onto farms, and we're going to be able to see how they do in proper scientific trials. And that's the other thing, Ed. When I started up BOFIN, then I had people come to me in the industry who said, no, farmers can't do on-farm trials. And that, I tell you what, when that came back to me, I thought, right, I'm going to prove you wrong. Well, we've proved them wrong. So the research trials that we've done, we've got some proper on-farm research. We've got some real vindication from the researchers that we've been doing proper on-farm research. We can do that with gene editing as well, and help understand how these traits actually perform on farm.
Great, thank you. And I suppose then, we've mentioned about what's happening here in England with the legislation. I think read recently the amount of inward investment that's taken place in England in gene editing as a result of well-designed legislation. Rebecca, if I could turn to you, I'd be interested to understand a bit more that as the regulator, how is the FSA enabling gene editing, and what was the process like of removing gene editing from the GM regulations as they were to what we're moving towards now?
Yeah, thanks very much. And yes, so I'm very glad that regulation has already come up so often. And you've talked about the predictability and the consistency of regulation and the importance of regulation in both making sure that things are safe, which is always our first concern, but also ensuring that the regulations are proportionate. And the GMO regulations, the overarching framework, it's been in place for many decades now, designed at a time perhaps when some of the issues that we're now confronting were not so pressing. So thinking about climate change, thinking about changing diets, and also we know a lot more about the technology. So we've introduced a new regime now in England. It's not quite true to say that you're not able to have gene-edited crops elsewhere and products, because you can apply through the GMO regulations, of course. That route is still available. And I think where I think that this is part of a sort of global reassessment of the regulations here, and we know that in Europe they're thinking about this as well, to make sure that the regulations are proportionate. And I think what one of the panelists said is very key, that our definition, we call this precision breeding, very similar concept, that these are techniques that are already applied, that can be applied sort of naturally, let me put that in inverted commas, but traditional breeding can create some of these changes, but the timeframes are very long for that, and we don't want to stand in the way. We don't want to be a barrier when we can regulate safely and have a more proportionate approach. So, although we are doing something, we have our own regime. It's not the same as the regime planned in the EU. I think there are some common aspects. That proportionate element, defining this as changes that could be achieved through traditional breeding. And then the importance of consumer information, which is quite key to our regime, as well as I know the one that's being developed in Europe. Because you mentioned research with farmers, the Food Standards Agency, as we were developing the regulations, we spent a lot of time thinking about consumers and working with consumers to understand their needs and what they felt about it. And although there are barriers to the acceptance of new technologies in food, many people are cautious about it. What they do say very consistently is they want to know that the regulator has got their back, that there is a strong system of regulation. Somebody is checking that innovative food techniques, innovative food products, innovative feed products are safe, and that's our job. So we engage consumers as part of that development process.
Great, thank you. And I suppose bringing back in the conversation, really, we know that the role of sort of consumers, civil society is a key part of this. I suppose one thing that's often asked, I find, is for consumers, farmers, and others, is to understand the tangibility, because we often talk in acronyms and sort of terms that a lot of people sound quite far away. But perhaps Tom Adams, can we start to explain maybe where some of the tangible benefits, you mentioned we're not looking at maybe just commodity crops anymore, but what really interests me is that we're not just looking at necessarily reducing inputs, but we're looking at consumer benefits or allergens or those other areas in livestock nutrition, for example. How do we sort of provide those tangible benefits so that consumers and others really sort of buy into the process?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a really important question, and one of the things that we've found for sure is that I think you still look at general surveys of people, and you'll be met with a certain amount of skepticism about how they feel about gene editing. It's a larger number than what we found are really skeptical about it when you present them with a tangible product. So the first product that we made was a high nutrition leafy green, and we did that by taking a natural leafy green and taking an off flavor out of it that tasted like wasabi unless you removed it. So it made it so it was basically, I don't know if you eat a lot of kale in Europe without cooking it, from what I've heard, but people actually eat it raw in the US, and it's really rough. So this is something as nutritious as kale, but a nice flavor and eats more like a lettuce. So we brought that to the public. We brought it to fairs in areas that didn't like GMOs, and we gave it away, and we explained to people what it was and how we made it. 6,000 people ate it. Almost nobody walked away. The people who walked away walked away because they were worried because it wasn't grown organically, for whatever that means. And they consumed it. 3,000 people were willing to fill out surveys, and we got less than 1% mentioned technology, and most of those mentions were positive about how technology was making something available to them. I think on the grower side as well, we've created now basically in 5 years did what it took 100 years to do in corn. We've got blackberries that we can grow 3 times as dense as the normal blackberries are grown by making them into more of a bush. That allows a farmer to get 50 to 100% more yield, in some areas even more than that. And growers are actually some of the best scientists that you'll ever find. They've set up very good trials. And I think it is true. I don't know about the government supplementing them, but usually the companies working with them will pay for the trials. They'll, work something out there.
Where do you find these companies? I've been looking for them.
Come to the U.S. we ends up costing a lot of money.
You'd pay us, huh?
A lot of money to support the trials, but at least providing the plants for the trials, and then they can sell the berries, so they also make money on the plant. So there's a mutualism there in getting it done. But we find the growers are quite excited about the products as well as the consumers. We've now the next product that we have coming down, and I didn't realize until I asked consumers, so you have to ask consumers as well what bothers them about things, that 80% of people in North America anyway don't like the large hard seeds in blackberries. They get stuck in their teeth and they complain about them. So if you ask them what you'd like to change, besides shelf life and consistency, 80% didn't like the hard seeds. So we've actually remove the hard shell around the seed. I think we're going to find that it makes the berry more nutritious because you get the soft seed. So now it's much more like eating a seedless grape than a seeded grape. Those are just getting into the first trials and should become marketable within a year or two. But I think you start to get these things where you're able to demonstrate a real benefit to a consumer. And not everybody's going to care about whether they got rid of the seeds or whether we made more nutritious greens, but there are going to be plenty. We've taken an approach that it's our responsibility to share with consumers that genetics was used, and they're actually kind of proud of it. So we aren't putting gene on the label because people don't know what a gene is, but we do talk about the technology and make sure that they know that these are different than others. And we're again have gotten a very good response to that. Really, the feedback I'd had for many years was, if you're going to be transparent, you have to be transparent before people ask. So we're starting with the idea that you want to put some form of label that makes it clear, without creating regulations that will have unintended consequences of making it harder for people to make products.
Rebecca, do you want to come in on that?
Yes, so as a regulator, we thought about that aspect of consumer information very carefully. And so again, in England, we are not, we did not recommend to government that they should be labelled in the way that, for example, GMOs currently are. But we do very much expect the food industry, food companies, producers to be communicating with consumers about about the food, and particularly with these innovative products which may have health benefits, for example. We know that some companies we talk to are, quite keen to exploit that and to make sure that consumers know that a product that they may be getting, for example, has a higher nutritional content. And just from our general surveying, we do know we survey consumers monthly. Actually, we have a regular consumer tracker. People really do care about the health benefits of the food that they eat. They care about the environment. So, and those are also factors we know from broader consumer engagement on food innovation, not specifically precision breeding, but those are also factors that make people more likely to think, yeah, okay, that's something I might try. It's an innovative food, but if it has a health benefit, or if I'm convinced it's going to have an environmental benefit, I might be more likely to try it. So there's a lot of crossover between gene editing, precision breeding, and people's attitude towards innovation and innovative foods in general, I think.
Okay. What I will say is please do send in your questions via Slido if you can. I don't know if the link is available, but please send them in. I know this is something that often has a lot of interest from yourselves. Just before we sort of open up some questions, Michael, on that point about differences, we look at different regulatory regimes. Some have discussed labeling, others have discussed tier 1, tier 2, maximum number of edits. How do we ensure that we have that global consistency where we can before we start going off in different directions on a sort of regulatory regime by regulatory regime? Because if we want to move these goods and potentially trade them across borders, we're going to be limited in what we can do, surely, if we're only identifying small specific markets. How do we make this a globalized benefit, and something that presumably can also help benefit developing economies and others where that some of the gains are really in demand?
I think, first of all, and I give you an example on gene editing, because we all learned, and I feel everybody was unhappy what happened also around GMOs. We all learned also as an industry, we need to engage proactively to explain gene editing. I think many years back, since 12 years, on a regular basis, the seed sector is meeting the diversity of governments to explain what's happening, what's tomorrow, because we are speaking about regulations of today. Science is moving quicker than policies. FAO is always saying policy needs to evolve. And this is a reality, because what we put in place today, tomorrow we don't know if it's enough. And I think that's a dialogue we build. That's the first thing. The second thing is also, and therefore we are here, we are speaking about systems, about food. Where's food starting? With seeds. And for us, that's a concern. Within the food and retailers level, I think the understanding of the seed and where the things are coming from is not really there. Therefore, we are coming also in places here to engage the discussion, to explain more our responsibility. I think this engagement, we need to take it. The farmers, you know exactly. That means every seed needs to be locally adapted. Yeah. It's not a commodity. We cannot throw it out like that. I think the work the seed companies are doing everywhere, globally, where I'm going from Bangladesh to Uruguay to Australia or elsewhere, the seed sector has to work with the farmers, because the seeds needs to be locally adapted. The business model is not flying, for us not, and for you not. I think the openness of discussion is essential. And perhaps I will end. Currently we are speaking about the end of multilateralism. I don't take a stand on this one, but okay, we can say that's a reality. On gene editing, in any case, there's no multilateralism. Since ever, we have to engage individually, with each government. Is it the US? Is it Canada? Is it, okay, Europe is a little bit different. Now UK is also a little bit different. We need to move around to engage, and that's the way we have to do it. Open, engaging, and we have to explain. And I'm always saying, perhaps sometimes you have not all the responses, and that's also the collaborative effort with regulatory institutions.
Great. Ed, can I just...
Tom, do.
Just building on what Michael said. What is really exciting, as Michael says, is some of the technologies that are coming through. And we need to bring that into the field and research it. And that's why it's so important to involve farmers in that research. Now, I'm lucky enough that I've been to places like John Innes Centre, Rothamsted and so on, and I've seen some of the new technologies that they're bringing on and the traits that they're developing. And I press my face against that window of research and I go slack-jawed in amazement at what I see. We want that in our fields. Some of the work they're doing in crop physiology at John Innes Centre, some of the work they're doing in plant interactions with fungi and so on at Crop Science Centre. That is just so brilliant. And let's bring that into the field, see how it reacts, what its applications are. But the important thing is, let's do the research in a proper research environment with scientists. And what we're doing with our platforms is that we are then sharing that knowledge, and sharing that knowledge with everyone across Europe and everyone, but we're sharing the knowledge. We're not sharing the crops themselves, and that's an important aspect of this. These are research trials. They're not going to go near any markets in Europe. So all of this talk about SPS agreements and is that going to clamp down? I sincerely hope it's not going to clamp down where we've got to with precision breeding here. Because as I say, we need to bring it out onto the farm to see how it performs on farm. We can do the research and then we can share the knowledge about that.
Yeah, that's an important point. UK, EU are looking to align on SPS standards. Just thank you for the flurry of questions that have now come in on Slido. Rebecca, I don't know if you want to pick this one up. Discussions, obviously, from between the FSA and end markets. Where do you see the prospects at retail? I don't know if that's something that you've spoken, obviously, to retailers and others placing goods on the market.
Well, it's part of the sort of information environment that we think needs to be in place for consumers to accept these products, and I think it needs to be that supply chain transparency. As I said, we're not requiring labelling, but we certainly do think that consumers will want to know about the food, about the benefits of the food, and retailers will need to feel assured about that information as well. So I do think they have a part to play.
Yeah, I think it's worth adding as well that on the precision breeding group that we have within UK government, there are all parts of the supply chain on there, retailers included, and it's been quite refreshing that a lot of retailers have looked at their sort of added value, I think, of where consumers will be interested and what the gains are. We have about half a minute left of time, so I'll wrap things up there, but I'd really like to reflect. I appreciate in half an hour we've tried to unpack the global system of gene editing as best as we can. But I'd really like to thank our speakers, Michael Keller, Tom Adams, Tom Allen Stevens, and Rebecca Sudworth. Please thank them for their time. Thank you.